There has been a lot of talk about moving away from the US dollar as the reserve currency around the world. And let's talk about this for a moment, because so many people think, well, the US dollar, it suffers from a few problems. The fact is, the US debt is at 30 to 32 trillion, and so that represents like 110% GDP. There's a lot of people saying, well, Congress is out of control, they can't seem to control spending, and also some countries want to move away from the US dollar because they don't like the fact that you can sanction them when you're using their currency, like the US dollar in the SWIFT system. So a lot of people say, well, we're gonna lose the reserve currency status. But when you think about it, there really isn't any other potential reserve fiat currency like a country. Like, for instance, China has the RMB, but no one thinks that there's any chance of that being a reserve currency. And one of the major reasons why is it's one that's not convertible. For instance, if you go to China, convert your US dollars, use some paper money there, and then when you're done, you come back to the US and you say, I want to convert my RMB to the US dollar. It doesn't matter where you are, hardly any place will convert your money. Now, it's possible in New York City you might find someplace at a bad exchange rate, they might be willing to do it, but it'll be very, very hard. Whereas you could go in the Midwest and convert like euros to dollars or even a Japanese yen. That's a sign of a real reserve currency. Nobody wants the RMB, and the reason why is it's not a convertible currency, and there's also capital controls, and the Chinese system is very opaque. It's just not really one that people trust. In fact, a sign that there isn't much trust in the system is the fact that only about 2% of all of the assets in reserve currencies are run in central banks. Only 2% is in RMB. So the fact is, there's real clear proof that that's not going to be the reserve currency. So people show a lot of articles like, Saudi Arabia said they might be taking RMB as a payment for oil, but they haven't done it yet. And the truth is, it might actually be more for headlines than anything else. The other thing is, what will the Saudis do with their RMB? Well, they could immediately just buy some junk from China, or is it possible they'll convert it to a different currency like the dollar? But that's not so easy though with the RMB, since it's not freely floating, it's not freely convertible currency. That might actually be stuck with that currency, and that would be a first sign that, hey, it's not exactly a reserve currency. Whereas with the dollars, there are problems with it, like inflation, but the fact is you can easily convert it to whatever you want. Now, the interesting thing is, I'm actually going to bring up something that nobody on YouTube has been talking about in terms of where do we go with the issue of losing the reserve currency status. Because a lot of people worry about inflation. They worry about the fact that the dollar continues to lose value year after year, and I think it's clear that Congress is not going to be responsible, and even the Federal Reserve, they've kind of created a big mess, which has allowed for inflation to get out of control for a long time. So a lot of people, for one thing, they're bringing up Bitcoin. Now, that's a possibility. It could be partly a reserve currency, a form of a stable form of value. I think that's definitely a possibility. But one of the more interesting developments has to do with states like Texas that are they're using a part of the Constitution which actually allows states to create currency. Basically, the Constitution says states can create currency as long as it's gold or silver. So I think Texas wants to create some kind of cryptocurrency that's based upon gold or silver deposits. So in that case, it actually would be a pretty stable form of currency. And what would be interesting about it is if you actually have states that are actually trying to outcompete with the US dollar. So in the end, what happens is that everybody's pointing to Russia and China and Brazil. Oh, that's the future. And the truth is, nobody trusts these countries. They're not convertible. They're not free. They're not very transparent, and you really don't know what will happen. Whereas the idea of a real currency backed by gold or silver issued by an American state like Texas, that actually sounds like a good idea that's actually in the works. And it would be kind of ironic if everybody is paranoid about these authoritarian regimes, about that they're going to overtake the dollar, but in reality it's going to be just a large US state that does it. I think that would be a good idea, because we do need to have a stable currency, and right now the dollar doesn't really have a competitor. Now competition can actually definitely help things. If the Federal Reserve and Congress sees that there are some states that are trying to undercut the dollar and they're trying to create their own currency, maybe they would actually realize that they need to be more responsible. They can't just spend an unlimited amount of money and expect that people will just buy a debt at a low interest below the cost of inflation, and that would be fine. I think that's a huge problem. Whereas I think right now we're also experiencing an explosion in Bitcoin. It went from like a low of 15,000 just like a few, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, and people just don't really trust these fiat currencies. So there's a lot of money flowing into Bitcoin at the moment, and Bitcoin is it could actually be a true reserve currency, because you can impose sanctions on it. It's can be move around the world within minutes. It doesn't really care who you are. And even the fact that Bitcoin has old code in it, it's kind of amazing how we're able to use new technology to actually transfer payments a lot faster. And even an old technology like Bitcoin, they're able to add some new things like NFTs and some kind of things like that on top of it. So I'm really amazed by what's possible. That would actually probably make more sense as a possible reserve currency. Maybe it would have several reserve currencies. It'd have states that have their own crypto backed by gold and silver, and maybe the decentralized Bitcoin, that'll also be another option. But I just don't see a situation where everybody around the world, like India, says, hey, I want to put our money in China, especially because you can't really get your money out so easily. There are a lot of billionaires who actually have invested in China over the years, and they're finding out that it's not so easy to move their money outside of the country. So I don't think that's the kind of future that people want. I think people like freely floating currency if possible. So I know a lot of people are worried about this issue, but the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that usually you don't lose your reserve currency overnight. It's a long process. So there is probably still a process underway where we can prevent losing the dominant currency status if people start taking this a lot more seriously and start contacting their member of Congress and letting them know that they don't support all of this crazy spending, unlimited spending until the country is bankrupt. So let's see, Danny has one last comment before I go.
Hey guys, yes, Bitcoin. I did buy some Bitcoin today, and we'll see how it does.
I thought not it was a reserve currency. You think it's reserve currency?
Reserve currency. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be kind of a basket of currencies that other countries will use. So, unfortunately, I think the U.S. will lose some dominance. I don't think it's going to be dramatic over a sudden period. I think it'll be a slow decline. So in 30 years from now, I think the U.S. might not have the same dominance, unfortunately, because it just seems like it's slipping every day. So I think that they can change it, though. There can be a bounce back, but it doesn't seem to that's going to happen anytime soon, because there's just too much spending, and there's no way to stop it unless you just do a complete reset.
Okay, well, that's all I have to say about reserve currencies. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Click the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.